Sutra on the Difficulty in Repaying the Profound Kindness of Parents. Translated by the Yao Chin Tripitaka Master, Kumarajiva. Thus have I heard. Once the Buddha was in the kingdom of Shravasti, in Jetavana, Anathapindika's park, with a great gathering of 2,500 bhikshus, and 38,000 bodhisattva mahasattvas in all. At that time, the world-honored one, leading the great assembly, walked directly toward the south and unexpectedly saw a pile of bones gathered on the side of the road. At that time, the Tathagata threw the 5 parts of his body to the ground in reverential obeisance to the withered bones. Ananda joined his palms and addressed the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, you are the great teacher of the triple realm, the compassionate father of the 4 kinds of birth, and the one whom the masses of people turn to in reverence. Under what causes and conditions do you pay reverential obeisance to these dried-up bones?" The Buddha told Ananda, "Although you and the others are my chief disciples, having renounced the family life a long time ago, yet your knowledge of things is not comprehensive. This pile of withered bones could be the ancestors of my previous life, or my parents of many past rebirths. It is under these causes and conditions that I now pay reverential obeisance." The Buddha told Ananda, "You will now divide this pile of withered bones into 2 parts. If they are the bones of men, then they will be white in color and heavy. If they are the bones of women, they will be black in color and light." Ananda addressed the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, while men are alive, they adorn themselves in elegance with shirts, belts, shoes, and hats, so that from one faraway glance anyone could know that they are men. While women are alive, they often apply cosmetics and powders, and daub on perfumes and musks for adornment, so that anyone will immediately know that they are women. Now, however, after death, their white bones are all of a similar sort. Teach us, your disciples, how we can discern between them." The Buddha told Ananda, "If these men, during their lives, enter into a Sangharama and listen to lectures on the sutras and vinayas, pay reverential obeisance to the 3 jewels, and recite the names of the Buddhas, then their bones will be white in color and heavy. Women of this world lack the strength of wisdom and are easily drowned with passion. Giving birth to and rearing their sons and daughters is regarded as their heavenly duty. The life of every single child born relies on the nourishment of a mother's milk. The milk is transformed from the mother's blood, and every child drinks a lot, up to 84 pecks of the mother's white milk. Therefore the mother becomes worn and haggard, and her bones appear black in color and light in weight." Once Ananda heard these words, pain cut into his heart, and shedding tears as he sorrowfully wept, he addressed the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, how can one repay the kind virtue of mothers?" The Buddha told Ananda, "Now listen attentively, and I will explain it for you in detail. The mother's womb carries the child, which normally gestates for 10 lunar months. This is extremely burdensome and strenuous for her. During the first month in the mother's womb, the embryo is like dew atop grass, which may not last from morning until night, as it collects in the early morning, yet disappears by noon. During the 2nd month of pregnancy, the embryo is just like congealed curd. During the 3rd month of pregnancy, it is like coagulated blood. During the 4th month of pregnancy, it partially assumes a human form. During the 5th month of pregnancy, the fetus inside the mother's belly develops 5 limbs. What are these 5? The head is 1 limb, while the 2 elbows and 2 knees are also 1 limb each. Together they complete the 5 limbs. During the 6 months of pregnancy, the fetus in the mother's belly forms the 6 sense organs. What are these 6? The eyes are 1 sense organ, the ears are the 2nd, the nose is the 3rd, the mouth is the 4th, the tongue is the 5th, and the mind is the 6th. During the 7th month of pregnancy, the fetus inside the mother's belly develops the 360 bones and joints, and develops the 84,000 hair pores. During the 8th month of pregnancy, the fetus develops the intellect and the 9 orifices. During the 9th month of pregnancy, the fetus inside the mother's belly absorbs the sustenance provided by food, such as the essential nutrients from peaches, pears, garlic, fruits, or the 5 grains. Inside the mother's body, where the gastric organs extend downward and the intestinal organs extend upwards, it is like the surface of the earth. There is mountain rising up which has 3 names: Sumeru, Karma Mountain, and Blood Mountain. This metaphorical mountain will collapse one time and transform into a single stream, where the mother's blood will coagulate to become the food for the fetus. During the 10th month of pregnancy, when every single part of the child's body is completely formed, it will descend to be born. If this child is to be deemed filial and obedient, then it will be born peacefully, with hands raised and palms joined, without harming the mother or causing her any suffering. If this child is to be deemed capable of the 5 heinous acts, he will injure the mother's uterus, tearing at her heart and liver and trampling on her pelvic bones. Such profound suffering of giving birth to this child is like the flurry of 1,000 knives, or even like 10,000 blades piercing at her heart. To explain this even more clearly, there are still the 10 kindnesses. The first is the kindness of carrying the fetus while guarding and protecting it. The second is the kindness of enduring the suffering of the approaching childbirth. The third is the kindness of forgetting the misery of childbirth. The fourth is the kindness of swallowing the bitter while sharing the sweet with the child. The fifth is the kindness of offering the dry spots to the child while taking the wet ones. The sixth is the kindness of breastfeeding and rearing. The seventh is the kindness of washing away the filth. The eighth is the kindness of missing the child who is traveling far away. The ninth is the kindness of deep sympathy for the child. The 10th is the kindness of utmost love for the child. A verse on the kindness of carrying the fetus while guarding and protecting it. Causes and conditions are reinforced for many kalpas until the fetus now comes to be held in the mother's womb. After a few months, the 5 limbs develop, and after 7 periods of 7 days, the 6 sense organs form. The mother's body becomes heavy like a mountain, while her activity and rest feels like the windy devastation of the kalpa. She never wears any of her fine clothing, thus her dressing mirror is tarnished by dust and dirt. A verse on the kindness of enduring the suffering of the approaching childbirth. Pregnancy lasts for 10 lunar months, and as the difficult labor draws near, every morning the mother is severely ill, and every day she is faint and weak. Her distress and fear is difficult to express, as anguished tears cover her breast lapel. choking back sorrow, she tells her family that she is only afraid that death will overcome her. A verse on the kindness of forgetting the misery of childbirth. On the day the compassionate mother delivers the child, her 5 organs are all extended, open, and her body and mind are completely exhausted, as her blood flows like that from a slaughtered lamb. After the delivery, when she hears the child is healthy, her gleeful joy is many times more than normal, yet after her joy has settled, her grief returns, as painful sorrow pervades her heart and gut. A verse on the kindness of swallowing the bitter while sharing the sweet with the child. The kindness of parents is deeply profound, while their care and sympathy is unending. The mother shares the sweet without the slightest hesitation, and swallows the bitter without knitted brow. Her love is so profound that her passions are difficult to endure. Her kindness is so deep that it is many times that of her sorrow. Only wanting her child to be full, the compassionate mother never complains of her own hunger. A verse on the kindness of offering the dry spots to the child while taking the wet ones. The mother is willing to cast her body into the wetness so that the child can be moved to where it is dry. With her 2 breasts she satiates the child's hunger and thirst, and with her sleeve she covers him from the wind and cold. She is kind and sympathetic, as she constantly forgoes the pillow. Thus, by favoring the child, she is able to make him happy. Only wanting her child to be comfortable, the compassionate mother does not seek amenities. A verse on the kindness of breastfeeding and rearing. The compassionate mother is like the great earth, and the stern father is like the heavens. One covers and the other supports. Thus the kindness is equally everywhere. The kindness of the mother and father is also thus. They do not glare in hatred or anger, and are not upset if the child has crippled hands or feet. From when in the belly to when the mother delivers the child, and throughout the day, the parents care for and comfort their child. A verse on the kindness of washing away the filth. Originally the mother was as pretty as a hibiscus flower. Her spirit was strong and abounding. Her eyebrows were both like fresh willow leaves, and her complexion surpassed that of a red lotus. Her kindness is so deep that she will mar her beautiful face, and in washing away the child's filth, she injures her hips and back. Solely acting to comfort her son or daughter, the compassionate mother will tarnish her appearance. A verse on the kindness of missing the child who is traveling far away. Separation in death is truly difficult to endure, yet separation in life is truly also painful. When the child travels beyond the passes and mountains, the mother laments in her village. Day and night her thoughts are with her child, as 1,000 tears flow in a trail, like a monkey whimpering affectionately for its child. Bit by bit this tears into her gut. A verse on the kindness of deep sympathy for the child. The concerned feelings of the parents are so profound, and their kindness so deep, that it is truly difficult to repay. If the child suffers, the mother is willing to endure it instead. If the child toils, the mother is uneasy. If she hears her child is on the road, traveling far away, she has sympathy for her child who will have to lay out in the cold at night. If the son or daughter has a moment's hardship, it causes sustained duress in the mother's heart. A verse on the kindness of utmost love for the child. The kindness of parents is deep and profound. Their concerned sympathy does not have a moment's rest. Whether active or at rest, their hearts follow with their children, and whether near or far, their thoughts are with them. Even when the mother's years reach 100, there is constant worry for her 80-year-old child. Do you want to know when such kindness and love ends? It only begins to dissipate after the end of her life. The Buddha told Ananda, "When I observe sentient beings, although they are reborn as human beings, their thoughts and actions are still foolish and ignorant. They are inconsiderate of their parents' great kindness and virtue. They do not show reverence, they forget kindness, and they betray righteousness. They lack humane compassion, and are neither filial nor obedient." During the 10 months the mother is with child, when she arises or sits, she is discomforted, as if lifting a heavy burden. She cannot keep down her food or drink, as if she is a chronically ill person. When the baby is full term and it is the time for birth, the mother endures all kinds of pain and suffering, and in the moment of childbirth she is fearful of her mortality. Like a slaughtered pig or sheep, the blood flows all over the ground. She endures suffering such as this. Once the child is born, the mother swallows the bitter and shares the sweet, embraces him, nurtures and rears him, and washes away his filth. She does not dread the labor and toil, and endures the cold and heat without complaining of her hardships. The child lays in the dry spots, while she sleeps in the wet spots. For 3 years, the child drinks the mother's white milk blood, and from infancy to childhood, and through to adulthood, they are taught manners and righteousness. Marriages are arranged, wealth is prepared, and a profession is sought. Parents take up this hardship, endeavoring and toiling 100 times over, never speaking of their kindness and graciousness. If the son or daughter is ill, the parents become awfully worried, grieving to the extent that they may become ill themselves, and considering it a trivial matter. Only when the child's illness has been cured will the mother's sickness be alleviated. Like this, the children are nurtured and reared, with the hope that they will soon become adults. Reaching their maturity, however, they become unfilial, as their respected parents may offer warnings, but the children do not know obedience or compliance. While having interactions, they lack manners and glare with an evil eye. They deceive and insult their uncles, and hit and curse at their brothers. Ruining and abusing any familial sentiment, they are without manners or righteousness. Although they are educated, they do not observe rules or training. They often will not comply with their parents' instructions or commands. Talking with their brothers, they are defiant and rebellious with every encounter. In coming and going, they do not inform their father or mother. Their speech and acts are haughty and arrogant, and they manage their affairs with an impulsive mentality. As to their parents' admonitions and punishments, and their uncles' warnings, these children are immature and are to be pitied. Thus, elders must protect and defend them. As they gradually become older, they become fiercely rebellious and obstinate. They do not hide their defiance, and instead become resentful. Rejecting their families and friends, these children befriend evil people. Before long, bad habits become natural, and they recognize wrong as right. Some may be tempted by others to run away to another village, thus betraying their parents by leaving home and separating from their family. Some may become brokers or civil servants, and in the course of time become tied down, or they may marry, and due to this are detained for a long time, never to return home. Some in other villages may not be able to be cautious, as they are plotted against and injured by others, and lured into evil schemes. They may be wrongly punished and convicted, being placed in jails, kangs, or shackles. Some may encounter disease and misfortune, be entwined in adversity and hardship, or be captive to the sufferings of starvation and emaciation, without others caring for or treating them. Being detested and scorned by others, they are abandoned in the streets, and due to this their lives will end, since no one will rescue or treat them. Their bodies will swell and decay, and then, desiccated by the sun and blown away by the wind, their white bones will disintegrate and scatter throughout the dirt of that other village. To have a joyous reunion with the family is now forever impossible. By betraying compassionate kindness, the children will never know that their aged parents will eternally worry and lament over them. The parents' eyes will become blind from weeping, their throats will become hoarse from mourning, and they will eventually weaken and die from constantly lamenting on the memory of their child. As ghosts, they will cling to their child's spirit, not once letting go. Furthermore, some such children may not honor an education or profession, and may participate in outlandish activities. Villainous, vulgar, and mischievous, they enjoy a lifestyle that is unbeneficial, and by fighting and stealing, they cause transgressions against the village. They drink alcohol and gamble while their debauchery is excessively negligent. Through implicating their brothers, they further distress their parents. Leaving at dawn and returning at dusk, they never inquire about their respected parents. Throughout the month, from morning to night, they never attend to them to see if they need exercise or rest, or are too cold or hot. Moreover, they do not know how to arrange their beds or offer them pillows. By being estranged like this, they do not participate in or inquire about their parents' daily life. As the years pass by for the parents, their appearance becomes withered and emaciated, and they are ashamed to see others, being left to endure deception and oppression. Some have a father who might be widowed, or a mother who is a widower, living alone in an empty house, as if only a traveler staying in someone else's home. Cold, hungry, and thirsty, no one has knowledge of them. From morning to night they constantly cry, groaning and sighing to themselves. Children should offer delicacies in support of their respected parents. If this generation of reckless children accomplishes nothing, and every activity brings them shame, then their parent will be fearful that others will blame them and tease them. Some, having wealth and food, will support their wives and children instead, forgetting their own weariness and toil, and will not try to avoid the shame in these acts. Due to their wives' restrictions and control, they comply with every demand, yet when respected elders glare at and scold them, they are completely unfazed. Some, furthermore, may be daughters who are matched with a man. When they are not yet married, they are totally filial and submissive, yet after marriage they become increasingly unfilial. With the parent's slightest glare of displeasure, the daughter will foster resentment and enmity, yet she will endure her husband's attacks and accusations with the sweetest temperament. Though her husband has a different surname and ancestry, her sentiment runs deep, and her concern for him is profound. As for her own flesh and blood family, she retreats in neglect. Some move with their husbands to other villages in foreign regions, separating from their parents. Neither thoughtful nor loving, they cut off all communication, either spoken or written. This causes their parents' stomachs to knot in anxiety and twist in agitation. It is as if they are suspended upside down. Their every thought is of seeing their daughter's face, just as one who is thirsty and longs for a drink. Their compassionate thoughts for their offspring are without rest. The kind virtue of parents is immeasurable and illimitable. The transgression of being unfilial makes it ultimately difficult to discuss. At that time, the great assembly who heard the Buddha explain the profound kindness of parents all threw their bodies to the ground and began beating their chests and striking themselves until their paws all gushed with blood. Having fainted and fallen to the ground, it was a long while before they regained consciousness. In a loud voice they called out, saying, "Such suffering, what agony, what agony! At present we are all deep offenders. Never awakened, we were oblivious as if traveling in the night. Now that we have realized our faults, our hearts are entirely torn apart. We only hope the world-honored one will sympathize and rescue us. How may we repay the deep kindness of our parents?" At that time, the Tathagata told all in the great assembly, by means of his eightfold, deeply resonant Brahma voice, "All of you should know this. I will explain it for you in detail. If there is a person whose left shoulder carries his father and right shoulder carries his mother, until his skin is rubbed away to the bone, and his bone is bored through to the marrow, and who circumambulates Mount Sumeru for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, until the blood pours down to his ankles, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who during a kalpa of starvation and famine, and for the sake of his parents, used his own body to slice off flesh, mincing it as fine as dust, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who, for the sake of his parents, held a sharp knife in hand and scooped out his eyes, offering them to the Tathagata, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who, for the sake of his parents, also used a sharp knife to slice his heart and liver, so that the blood would flow all over the ground, never expressing pain or suffering, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who, for the sake of his parents, used hundreds of thousands of swords and spears to stab his body at the same time, so from left to right they entered and exited his body, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who, for the sake of his parents, smashed his bones until they spewed out marrow, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. If there is a person who, for the sake of his parents, swallowed hot iron pellets, and did so for hundreds of thousands of kalpas until his entire body was scorched and charred, then that person would still not be able to repay the deep kindness of his parents. At that time, the great assembly, who heard the Buddha explain the kind virtue of parents, shed tears and sorrowfully wept as pain cut into their hearts. After carefully considering it, without machinations, they simultaneously cried out, and deeply expressing their humiliation, they addressed the Buddha together, saying, "World-honored one, we presently are all deep offenders. How may we repay the deep kindness of our parents?" The Buddha told his disciples, "If you wish to repay their kindness, then write out this sutra on behalf of your parents, or recite this sutra on their behalf, or repent your offenses and mistakes, or make offerings to the 3 jewels, or uphold the fast day precepts, or practice giving to cultivate merit, all on their behalf. If able to do so, you will then be named a filial and obedient child. If you do not do these activities, then you will be a hell dweller." The Buddha told Ananda, "If a person is unfilial, when his body decays and his life ends, he will fall into Avicii, the unremitting hell. This great hell is 80,000 yojanas wide, with iron walls on 4 sides and covered by nets. The ground is also made of iron and filled with flames that burn fiercely, while thunder crashes and lightning flashes. Molten copper and iron are scattered and poured over the offenders, while copper dogs and iron snakes constantly spew out smoke and fire, which sear and roast their fleshy fat to a char. Such suffering and pain, it is so hard to endure, and so difficult to bear all of the hooks, poles, spears, lances, iron bayonets, iron chains, iron mallets, iron halberds, and sword-leafed trees, as well as wheels with knives, which fall like rain from clouds in the air, all of them cutting or stabbing the offender in horrid punishment. Throughout kalpas, he endures torture without time, even for a temporary respite. Furthermore, the offenders are forced to enter into the remaining hells, where their heads are topped with fiery bowls, while iron carriages crush their bodies, passing quickly over them, both vertically and horizontally, until their guts are ripped open and their bones and flesh are pulverized. Within a single day they die and are reborn tens of thousands of times. To endure of suffering like this is all a consequence of committing the 5 heinous acts, or of being unfilial in a previous life. Therefore, one will receive such punishment." At that time, the great assembly who heard the Buddha explain the kind virtue of parents shed tears and sorrowfully wept as they addressed the Tathagata, saying, "How may we repay the deep kindness of our parents?" The Buddha told his disciples, "If you wish to repay their kindness, then reproduce this sutra on behalf of your parents. This will truly repay your parents' kindness. If you are able to reproduce 1 copy, then you will see 1 Buddha. If you are able to reproduce 10 copies, then you will see 10 Buddhas. If you are able to reproduce 100 copies, then you will see 100 Buddhas. If you are able to reproduce 1,000 copies, then you will see 1,000 Buddhas. If you are able to reproduce 10,000 copies, then you will see 10,000 Buddhas." Virtuous people like this, due to the power of reproducing sutras, will constantly and compassionately be protected by all Buddhas, who will cause such people, and their parents who birthed them, to be reborn in the heavens above, enjoying all kinds of happiness and bliss, and free from the suffering of the hells. At that time, Ananda and the great assembly of Asuras, Garudas, Kinnaras, Mahoragas, humans, non-humans, devas, nagas, yakshas, gandharvas, as well as the lesser kings and wheel-turning sage kings, all had their bodily hairs stand on end when they heard the Buddha speak. Sorrowfully weeping and choked up, they could not stop themselves. Each then set forth a vow, saying, "From now until the end of time, we would rather grind our bodies into particles of dust over hundreds of thousands of kalpas than disobey the sagely teaching of the Tathagata. We would rather pull out our tongues with iron hooks, extending them for a yojana, so iron ploughs could cut through them, causing blood to flow like a river over hundreds of thousands of kalpas, than disobey the sagely teaching of the Tathagata. We would rather have hundreds of thousands of bladed wheels enter and exit through our bodies than disobey the sagely teaching of the Tathagata. We would rather have our bodies wrapped and entwined in iron nets for hundreds of thousands of kalpas than disobey the sagely teaching of the Tathagata. We would rather have our bodies cut, pounded, chopped, and ground into hundreds of thousands of tens of thousands of pieces, so that our skin, flesh, muscle, and bone would completely disintegrate over hundreds of thousands of kalpas, than disobey the sagely teaching of the Tathagata." At that time, Ananda arose from his seat in complete serenity and addressed the Buddha, saying, "World-honored one, what should this sutra be called? How should it be preserved?" The Buddha told Ananda, "This sutra is called the Sutra on the Difficulty in Repaying the Profound Kindness of Parents. By this name should you preserve it." At that time, the great assembly, devas, asuras, and so forth, upon hearing what the Buddha said, all greatly rejoiced, faithfully receiving, honoring, and practicing it. Having made obeisance, they then withdrew,